I'm loving that we have our music back. Hey, everybody, this is Mark Pellegrino, Jennifer Bouani, and Jax Schumann coming to you courtesy of the Ayn Rand Center UK. And this is our show, TV Talk, where we talk about critically acclaimed television shows or just shows that we like. They don't necessarily have to be critically acclaimed, but they so often are. And we do it from an objectivist perspective. And sometimes we compare the characters and the plots to our favorite authoress and philosopher, Ayn Rand, and we see where these modern day shows stand on the scale of objectivist values. So today we are going to be talking about Sherlock. Yes, good old Sherlock for the BBC. Now, this is a series that I believe came out in 2010, didn't it, to 2017. For the BBC. It's based on Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's Sherlock Holmes detective stories, and it was reimagined, I say recreated in a sense, by Stephen Moffat and Mark Gatiss. And I know, some of my fans out there would think I was remiss if I did not say those guys were the writers of Doctor Who, the great TV show, which I have never seen. And look, I only got through 2 seasons of Sherlock. I actually got through all of the seasons, but 2 seasons this time. And that's too much television for me in 1 week to watch. So there's no possible way I'll ever get through Doctor Who. So it'll have to remain a mystery. Anyway, the stars of Sherlock are Benedict Cumberbatch as the inimitable Sherlock Holmes and the great Martin Friedman, who's one of my favorite actors on earth, as Dr. John Watson. This thing just got a slew of awards. It won Emmys up the yin yang, BAFTAs, Golden Globes. It's got like a 9.1 rating on IMDb, which few programs ever reach that height. I think The Godfather is one of them. So that goes to show you what type of quality of television show we're talking about here. And it is a great show. And I think objectivists would probably have a great deal to say about it. Now, look, before I came on, I was watching a little ditty about, the inspiration for the show. And there's a lot of some things that I sort of forgot. The time when Sir Arthur Conan Doyle wrote Sherlock Holmes coincided with the Industrial Revolution and the time when science was becoming popularized. And actually through great industrialists asserting itself into the lives of people and making products accessible to people, making people richer, and of course inspiring a whole, I think, romantic backlash against this great scientific explosion that was saving people. And Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, to me, rather than being the Mary Shelley of the world, in backlash against the science, fully embraces it and makes Sherlock Holmes the first forensic scientist ever, as far as I know, in literature. The man did in the 1800s what forensic scientists do today, and then some. And so I thought it was a great homage to the scientific revolution, the industrial revolution, the age of discovery and the great enrichment that was happening at that time. It seemed like Sir Arthur Conan Doyle was sort of making an homage to that. I don't know if that's a fact, but that certainly strikes me as that. So you guys, what did you think of old Sherlock Holmes?
I loved it. I absolutely, it's probably quickly becoming one of my new favorite shows. It's for sure in like the top 10. Oh, by the way, I'm correcting a mistake that I made on our last podcast, which was I didn't wear my Justified t-shirt. And so I'm wearing my Justified t-shirt this time. And then maybe next time I'll wear a Sherlock t-shirt, but just in case anybody cares. I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. The acting was brilliant. Season 1 Sherlock for me was, it was a good like starting place, like, because his character developed so well over the 4 seasons and the stories are compelling. There were a couple things that I thought were, what's the word, were sort of forced. And like for the sake of plot and not the sake of character. one of those examples was, I think it was the very first episode when he's trying, it's the first episode, Study in Pink, where the guy who done it was the cab driver, and Sherlock thought it was the passenger, and he was, they go through this whole foot chase and stuff, and it was, I think it was pretty obvious that like why would he think it was just the passenger and not question if it was the cab driver? That to me seemed a little contrived, but then again, you could also look at it like he was teaching Watson a lesson that his limp was psychosomatic. So maybe I could get away with it, but I didn't. There were a couple little things like that, but overall it was brilliant. I'll let Jennifer summarize too.
The fact that Sherlock stretches the bounds of believability and does impossible things. I mean, the show is riddled with that. I think if we were to really think about 90% of the stuff he does, it would be impossible. It would stretch the bounds of imagination. I like that though. Even if it may seem like a logical flaw in the story. Yeah, sorry.
That just happens to me all the time, even at phone calls. Jack's gonna attest to that. No, I love the show. I hadn't really paid much attention to it. Like I'd seen the two of them as I'm scrolling through, hadn't really thought about it. I didn't read these books as a kid. Of course, I've heard of them, but I just didn't think about it. And I was blown away by the artistry of this TV show to the point where I'm wondering if I need to actually give it a place on my TV show monument.
Wow, that's a big deal.
It was just from the act. The antagonists were formidable. They rose up to the level of Sherlock. The acting, the writing, the sets, the camera work, all the different angles, and it was just unbelievable. And I do understand, I did see a little bit of coincidences in the plot. It's very plot heavy, but I think that's the nature of these kind of stories, these detective, almost like
procedurals.
Yeah, where they, and so, but I thought they did such a good job of bringing it into the modern world and giving us that character stuff that we expect of our shows now and of our characters. And to make us attached to them and get addicted and want to watch and find out why is Sherlock like that. It worked for me.
So right.
You said procedural. Why would you classify this, say, as a procedural?
As a police procedural?
Yeah.
Like it's not like a Law and Order, but each episode is self-contained. And there's a mystery to find out. There's a solve the mystery, solve the crime, but there are definitely ongoing threads that carry through all the seasons. But they're starting to do that more and more now with traditional procedural shows like Law and Order. They did that with Hill Street Blues. So I like if I'm misusing the word, I thought that's kind of how you define what the the crime solving thing. But
you may be right. I just find procedurals to be filled with dialogue that no one would say, and they're for the very purpose that they need to, one, catch the audience up on where they are in the story, and keep them tuned in to keep spoon feeding them the facts as they go along. I find Sherlock to be one of those things that suffers no fools. It's coming at you at light speed, at the speed of Sherlock's own thinking. And I mean, there's plenty of times I have to rewind and catch things and even subtitle the piece because his mind is going so fast. It's like they don't care. You either catch up or you don't. And it's not in the procedural sense where it's not something where it's certainly not something someone would say out loud. It really is something someone would say out loud. It's just happening so quickly. You have to be a sprinter to catch up to it.
And Benedict Cumberbatch does such a great job of like just nailing that dialogue and like who knows how many takes he's had to do, but sometimes I think like, when is he going to take a breath? When is he going to, it just comes out like, and I feel like I need to like slow it down for, regular human people. Right off the bat, we have a couple relevant super chat questions. One of them from Louise for £10. Is there anything in particular about the way Sherlock was modernized and adapted to TV that you relate to in terms of your approach to modernizing and adapting Atlas Shrugged? It's almost like I could have planted that question myself.
It's a great question. And it's almost like you did. Did you?
I didn't. No, it's right there in the super chat.
Okay.
It's Jack's for $100. So yeah, I will say that that's just one of the other brilliant things I love about this show is the effects, the kind of digitization, and how they set up places, how they set up a scene, like a virtual scene for Sherlock to walk through. And when it was funny because when Jennifer and I were writing the pilot to The Strike, neither of us had seen Sherlock anymore, or yet. We hadn't seen Sherlock yet. But I was looking for a way to, because of course in our modern day technology, everybody texts. And so I was looking for sorry, my foot is itching. I was looking for a way to write text messages or to write it in screen format that isn't the boring looking over the phone and typing, because that just takes up so much time. And I went and I did all this research, and then I saw the great example in Sherlock. The text just shows up as a chyron on the screen, and I was like, I remember telling myself I should really watch the rest of Sherlock at some point. But what do you think, Jennifer?
Well, not only was I really pleased with how they brought it to the modern day, and I don't know what their thinking was, but it certainly is more relatable and why we wanted to bring Atlas Shrugged to the modern day. But I loved what they did. Was it between 3 and 4 where they created the Abominable Bride and went back to the original time of the series? And it made Jackson and I think like, is that something we might want to do after the series runs? Have a special that goes back and takes you back to the 50s and trains,
or even takes you back to the Nat Taggart time from like the 1800s, right?
See, the beauty of Atlas Shrugged is that it embraces human technology, and so any human technology can be substituted, and the storyline will still work. And likewise, Sherlock embraced the science of the time, so he can embrace the science and technology of today, and it's still going to work. What I think is particularly interesting about him is they made the character far more interesting and complex. The straight genius that everybody plays, the condescending genius, becomes an aspect of a well, what do you call Asperger's? A spectrum disorder where somebody has is that a chemical issue within their brain that makes them a savant in some areas, but completely oblivious in others, unable to handle social situations in the way that most people can. They give him that thing that I think is that well-known emotional and psychological phenomenon that we can relate to, and it gives us, and it modernizes it as well, I think, by giving him that. What do you guys think?
I think I agree with that. I think what's really interesting about Sherlock that could be considered different from somebody on the spectrum is I feel like he has deliberately chosen to be that way. And we see that, I think, in season 1 when he talks about how he there's really no room for emotion or things not relating to facts in his brain. He just puts it all out. And so I feel like he's made a choice, because in it, for like autistic or Asperger's, I think that there is kind of just something, whether it's chemical or something that's wired differently, where they're just not able to, like, especially if you talk about like extreme autistics, they can't they can't have like social interaction. But Sherlock himself refers to himself as a high functioning sociopath.
But a sociopath itself is I don't know. We're non-psychologists talking about phenomenons were going to go wrong. But a sociopath is not a choice. A sociopath is also a disorder that one doesn't necessarily choose and one can't work his way out of. I think one can probably learn to function appropriately in society, given the fact that you have this particular, I don't know whether it's an inherited disorder or whatever you call it.
It's the way the brain structure, because there's a doctor that did a study on sociopath brains and then discovered his own brain to have the same pattern.
Yeah, lovely.
That's yeah, and I think that probably is more like a Gina Gorlin question. Maybe we should bring her on one of these to talk about it. But yeah, I do think that it is really interesting. I love the way that but what's also fabulous though is that he develops over these 4 seasons into something that is less looking like a sociopath, right? He has and I actually saw that in season 2, because I watched season 2, episode 1 again last night, the Scandal in Belgravia, which was it was so funny. Like, Mark, you were talking about how you were forgetting season 1. I forgot. I'd forgotten a lot of season 2, episode 1, but in that, I believe it was that when Mrs. Hudson basically gets roughed up by the CIA, by the American CIA, which I had an issue with the guy who played the American CIA's accent. It wasn't good enough for me. Anyhow,
interesting.
But
interesting.
Yeah. And I realized I did some research and I realized why, but that's off topic. So Mrs. Hudson gets roughed up by the CIA people. And that is kind of like one of the first, you know that Sherlock cares for Watson. And you know that, and he's kind of, more or less flippant with Mrs. Hudson, but then sort of toward the end of the episode, where Watson was like, well, she's going to have to go stay with her sister now. And Sherlock is like, oh, she's fine. Don't worry about it. He's like, no, you don't understand. She has to go. And he goes and he like hugs her and he's like, if Mrs. Hudson ever left Baker Street, England would fall. I just thought that was like, that was like such a great intimate moment for between the two of them. It shows you he's able to show you how he cares for people in very strange ways.
And most importantly, Moffat and Gatiss are able to insert those moments in there to make you feel for Sherlock Holmes even more, to see that those cracks of humanity in him. But I thought Dr. Watson has a great eulogy for him by saying, you are the most human that I know. And he was going to stick by that. And I was an interesting comment to make, given our experience of him over the 2 seasons up to that point before he, quote unquote, kills himself. Spoiler alert. To save his friends, to save his 3 friends, Lestrade, Mrs. Hudson, and Doc Watson, which also shows how deep his feelings for these people go. And I did also like seeing, that flash of sexuality and challenge between he and, I think in the books or in the stories, he calls her the woman.
Yeah.
Right.
Irene.
Irene. But it was wonderful to see the game go back and forth between them and to see how genuinely they appreciated each other. And you know what else I got that reminded me of Ayn Rand? People used to wonder at how lonely she was. I mean, she had Frank, who she loved, but whom was nowhere near her equal. And so in a lot of ways that I think compelled her to look outside the relationship when she went with Nathaniel Brandon, whom she probably felt was her intellectual equal, or at least felt like she was looking in a spiritual mirror in a way that she didn't feel with Frank. And you feel that tremendous loneliness between 2 people who are at the pinnacle of their own professions and lives, when Moriarty and Sherlock are on the roof and they shake each other's hands. And for the first, and not for the first time, you see that love with Moriarty for a while, but when Moriarty really realizes that Sherlock Holmes isn't ordinary, that he is on his level, there's finally a connection that he feels to another human being, and it's emotional. It's beautiful. You see what love really is, even though it's twisted in that moment, and it's sick, and it's, you know, high stakes drama, and for all the wrong reasons. You see how lonely it is to be an individual, an individualist, and someone who follows your own light and your own thinking in the way Sherlock Holmes does.
I actually have something to say about that, and which I will in a second, but I want to get to this next super chat from Allie, which is relevant to both Mark and Jennifer, because season 2, I think, was probably one of the best seasons. But Allie says some of these in season 2, some of these psychological limps seem way out there. One point, nearly everyone thought Sherlock was responsible for all those murders when they have the criminals who did it behind bars. So I don't remember this as well.
Oh, it was Moriarty. Moriarty was trying to take down, that was when Moriarty was trying to take down Sherlock, right? And he had planted the story that Sherlock had hired him as an actor to pose as Moriarty and that
that's right.
Right. All these crimes were really him showing off and attempting to PR himself into a position of, detective royalty and admiration for society. And it ends up sort of the psychological game ends up working. People are so easily amused nowadays, and the truth could be staring them right in the face, but enough social media posts or enough proper quote unquote journalists say a thing and it's repeated enough, it becomes the truth.
Mm.
So yeah, I mean, unbelievable, yeah, but so what? It's cool. It's impossible. Nobody could do it, but Moriarty could.
So what, Jennifer, I think your favorite episode was season 2, episode 1, the scandal in Belgravia. We'll talk about what you liked.
After finishing season 4 last night, which season 4 was kind of almost over the top. Just it's like what is they had to keep raising the stakes every season to make it in. I don't know, and it just goes out there for me. But I love season 2, and I just absolutely love the woman. That I think it is a master class in sexual tension, first of all, and just because we were so badly wanting him to feel something for somebody, and they put this woman and him against each other. You've got the moment where they grab hands, and you think it's such a plot twist because you think that's the moment. Oh, they're falling in love. Yes, you want popcorn, and then there's this just amazing plot twist at the end when he figures out the passcode and calls her on her game, and you're like, oh God, it was just a game.
But it wasn't either. But I don't know that it was either. I thought it was real. What were you going to say?
No, I mean, it was she insists that it was a game, but he said there was a great dialogue exchange between the two of them. She insists it was a game, and he said, well, you lost it. Because she was trying.
I felt
it. Yeah, and I think it's also interesting that he never changes her ringtone when she texts.
I know.
The ringtone is always and you get that throughout all 4 seasons. He knows how to change a ringtone, but he chooses not to because there's something that appeals to him.
He wants to know that it's her.
Yeah, he's not lonely because she exists in the world, even though they can't be together.
You know what I love about this show too, and this is also, I think, from an objectivist perspective, you guys could tell me if I'm wrong. The feelings that all the characters have for each other, even the love and the respect that they have for each other, even when they're on the wrong sides of the tracks, all come from a recognition of something great in the other, the value of the other person. And this just reminded me, I've been reading Peter Bogdanovich's book. He has a book called The Movie of the Week, and he recommends a movie a week for 52 weeks. And the first movie in the book is An American in Paris with Gene Kelly.
Oh, I love that.
Okay, you love it, and so does he. But I got to tell you something. It pissed me off.
What?
Yes. Now he likes it. He likes it. Hey, okay. Let me tell you my reasons, because it relates to why I love the fact that all the characters in Sherlock Holmes love each other for a reason, right? Now he loved American in Paris because it was sort of the last hurrah of American optimism in Paris. It came just after the war. The idea of walking freely along the Seine and singing and dancing like that was really something special, and that American sense of optimism that of an American in Paris really meant something to him from a historical point of view, I think. However, what happens in it? You have a young woman who was saved and mentored by a man who she eventually fell in love with. Why? Because he was a great man. And you have a woman who embraces the Gene Kelly character, falls in love with him because she feels he's a great artist and wants and is his what do they call it?
Muse?
No, not his muse. You know, the person who supports the art. I'm having the
Benefactor?
He's his benefactor. But it's because of what he does. It's not because he's cute and young and, you know, but Gene Kelly falls in love with the young girl who's, you know, about to be married to the friend. Now there's no real reason for this. They just love each other and they have a feeling that it's going to be forever. And they both end up abandoning the people who love them for who and what they are, who have taken all this time to nurture a relationship. And I'm like,
I will have to watch it again then.
That's wrong with love in America. And that's why so many relationships end in disaster, or people end up hating each other 3 years into their relationship because they think it's all a chemistry thing, man. And that doesn't last. That's not real love. But you know what is real love? The love between John Watson and Sherlock Holmes, or Mrs. Hudson and Sherlock Holmes, or even Lestrade and Sherlock Holmes, or Sherlock Holmes and Moriarty. It's this feeling of passion and connectedness and reflection that you get off of seeing intense values, like an intensity of evaluation. There are qualities about this person that you admire. What were the qualities that they admired about each other? I never got this in American in Paris. I know we're going off topic here, but
we're going on a full-on Mark rant is what we're going on.
But because we're trying to compare, like where are things sort of in objectivist alignment, and what's great about that, and how does that work for the culture, and how good is that for the culture to see love is really about values. It's not about, you know, the feeling somebody gives you for a while, you know, because you're attracted to the shape of their ass.
Which, you know, I mean, that's a good quality too, but
it is a good quality, but it won't last.
It won't, that ass won't last. Shoot, now I was spending all my brain power coming up with a joke that I forgot what else I was going to say. The love thing is that you're absolutely right. I'll have to rewatch American in Paris. It's been like 100 years. But each one of those characters proves why they should be loved and what their value is. They prove it over and over and over. In Sherlock. So Sherlock's and Mrs. Hudson, Watson, Lestrade even. Moriarty doesn't really prove it, but this is actually a really interesting point that I just kind of started thinking about. And I mean, I will never pass up an opportunity to relate anything to Buffy the Vampire Slayer. But one of the running themes in Buffy is that, because she's this, you know, strong, powerful, supernaturally powerful vampire slayer, but you know, she could have been a monster. She could have been, and she comes up against other vampire slayers who, you know, just turned into like power hungry fiends and didn't care about killing human beings or whatever. But the running theme in Buffy is that what keeps her grounded is her love for her friends and her you know, Xander and Willow and Giles. Even it's the you know, they call it the Scooby Gang, and it's the it's that sort of friendship. And they even do an episode where what would happen if Buffy didn't have friends? And it was, it was like the apocalypse. And, but I think that that's a really important theme in Sherlock as well, is that you see Sherlock as he makes more connections, right? He makes the connection with Watson. He has a better connection with Mrs. Hudson. He makes the connection with Molly even, and with Watson's wife. As he makes more meaningful connections, he becomes a more, I don't want to say, I don't know if I should say a better human, or, he becomes a better person for it. And if you remember in the very first episode, Lestrade tells Watson, Sherlock is a great man. I hope one day he becomes a good one. And then in season 4, the very last episode, Lestrade says, Sherlock is a good man. He said he's not just a great man, he's a good man. Yeah. And that's it's a nice sum up of where his arc went.
This was a comment that reminds me of a comment made about a politician, and it may have been made about Lincoln. And I don't remember who made the comment, but it was something like that. He became a great man without losing his goodness, or something like that. And I know I bastardized that phrase, and the person who said it in history said it much better than I, but c'est la vie. Well, anyways, I watched up to season 2. Now, of course, I've seen them all, but I do not remember how they are going to get out of the clusterfuck of Sherlock's death and Moriarty's death. I mean, I know Sherlock's alive because his face is the very last thing we see in the cemetery, but they have to explain that, and I forgot how they did it. So tell me now, how did they do it?
Jennifer, you go.
How did he fall in front of our faces?
They started out with his fan group giving theories, and then he gives an interview to one of the fan guys. And at the very end of his explanation, the guy's looking at the board and he's like saying, so this happens, and he questions his answers. So at the end, you really don't know how much of the truth is really told to you. And
effectively, he faked it, right?
But how did he fake it?
So could have jumped off and landed on a thing and had all these people orchestrating it. But at the end, you don't know if that was exactly.
Yeah, there's the one theory that he actually throws, that they had this whole thing set up, and they had like a Mission Impossible type Sherlock face ready to go. Like, how they did that in Mission Impossible, they put different faces on, like you can just do that. And then you even sound like that person, but whatever. The one theory is that they threw before they threw Moriarty off the building, they put a Sherlock face on him and dressed him up as Sherlock. And
wait, what is this? Where is this information coming from?
Oh, it's coming from.
That came from the fan group.
It came from the fan group, but actually,
how do they explain it? How do they explain it in the show?
That's the thing, is they really don't. You see, before the fan group though, before they showed the fan group, they, at the very first, so he killed himself at the end of 2. And so the very first episode is like the preamble to episode 1 of season 3, right? They show what you're supposed to believe really happened.
But they cut, when they finished that scene, they cut to the fan group discussing theories. So you have to assume it's one of their theories. Then later on in that episode, you have him being interviewed, and he's got his own version, which is different from that.
Okay, now how do you guys feel about that as writers? Because to me, the real fan base is like, okay, there's no way anybody's getting out of this. The writers have to come up with something really slick. And you know what? That sounds really slick. Is you've answered it by not answering it, by giving a billion different possibilities.
Yeah,
and just knowing that Sherlock is clever enough that any of them could be true.
Right.
Yeah. That's I think that's where the suspension of disbelief buy-in happens, because he's earned it at this point. He's at this point by season 3, after 8 hours of watching him, you know that this man is a genius, and you know that he could just as easily fake his own death as, you know, as he could potentially die and come back somehow with some chemical that he injects himself with and claws himself out of a grave or whatever. But oh, see, now Buffy again. I keep going back to Buffy. But yeah, that's I think that is used really well, but it only works because they for sure earned it. What I hate is, and I can't remember like the whatever latest thing that I've watched a show, and like Max and I'll watch it together, my daughter, and it's like there's no, this is just coming out of the blue, right? It doesn't come out of the blue. It's like, yeah, I believe it. Sherlock could do it.
No, and it's because they've set up a world wherein that kind of impossibility is believable. You believe it with Lupin, you believe it with James Bond. You just believe it because those characters have been set up to have the kind of stature to pull it off, to pull off the impossible. They do it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we need to see that from time to time, right? I mean, we need to see that, you know, you can pull off the impossible.
Especially
and you can do it.
Is high up in intelligence, like his brother is.
And you can, what I like about it is that what I like about like James Bond and Sherlock is that they're not like supernaturally endowed. You know, they're human, they're high functioning humans, they're very well trained, but and that's what's cool about it, being able, like, yeah, that's achievable. That level of performance is achievable within the range of being a human being.
And if anybody's read the Bond books too, the Bond of those books, like Daniel Craig's Bond, which makes him my favorite Bond. I haven't seen the last Bond, but is a very accessible human being. He has issues. He grapples with his own conscience from time to time, but he is a lethal weapon. He's lethal because of he's got a cruelty in the objectivist sense of the term, right? People oftentimes will rail against Rand because she used the word cruelty in a sense that they thought she endorsed cruelty in the way that most people mean it. No, it just means you know exactly what you want, what you have to do, and what reality is telling you, and you unapologetically and mercilessly follow what reality is telling you to do with no apologies for yourself. And that's the way Bond is. But Bond goes through psychological traumas and falls in love and loses and goes to a fat farm, and he has a problem with alcoholism. In the books, he's a very complex character. And we're getting, what's that?
Speaking of issues, what did you think of his heroin? How the writers treated or heroin or cocaine or addiction?
Go ahead.
Well, I'm going to say two things. First, Allie for $2 says Sherlock's fake death is explained in the show. So Allie, put in the chat what it actually was, and then I'll read it out when you put it in there. But the heroin addiction, I thought was part of I thought it was kind of part of he's had a history with it, right? He goes to his mind palace on heroin, but then he gets really deep into it, and he does it at the behest of Mary, who tells him.
Season 3 on?
From season 3, I think. Did this happen in season 4, Jennifer? Oh, it happened between Abominable Bride. So yeah. At the end of season 3, you have to watch Abominable Bride, because that gives you the gateway to the old Sherlock, but he's on the plane. And which is done really, I like that sequence of going back and forth, and then you watch season 4, and then you find out kind of in the middle of season 4 that Mary is trying to save Watson, because Mary's dead and Watson is he's lost without her. He's cut off all ties with Sherlock, and Mary has come up with this great plan after she dies, to give a video to Sherlock saying the only way that you can save him is to make him save you, and it has to be believable. So
kind of melodramatic.
They remember all that. I like that melodrama. Another thing that I like about Sherlock Holmes, Lupin, and Bond are they are accessible characters, even though nowadays we're told that kind of heroism is passe. You shouldn't really aspire anymore. It's not true. Everybody's airbrushed and it's fake, and you shouldn't use these as standards anymore. But I don't know. I would love to be as smart as Sherlock Holmes, and I may not be as smart as him. I may not be able to observe as keenly as him, but having that example in the world for me to compare myself to need not hurt my self-esteem. It can inspire me to be better than I am. That's like, as a teacher, I notice many teachers reach down to students, and I think that's a terrible thing to do to your student. You are an aspiration. You should force your students to reach up to you. Don't talk down to them, talk up, and make sure that they are stepping onto platforms to get to you. You have to be accessible too. But I just wanted to throw this in. Speaking of real heroes, apparently, the Sherlock Holmes was based on a real guy. Did you guys know that he was based on a professor of medicine in Edinburgh by the name of Joseph Bell, who had such great power?
I have heard of that. I heard of Joseph Bell.
So it's not like Sherlock Holmes is an impossibility. This guy apparently used to be able to diagnose people who just walked into his door. That's how great a diagnostician he was. And he would nail their illness. So to me, it's an emulation of the age of science, industrialism, technology, human intelligence, and how far you can go with those things. It's an homage to everything that is great in humanity. So I'm digging it. I will watch all 4 seasons again, remind myself all this stuff.
So here's an interesting question that applies to all of us, but I'm going to ask Jennifer to answer it first. From Lou for 10 pounds. What are your thoughts on Mycroft? Does it bring anything different to a show when one of the co-creators, writers, is also an actor?
My thoughts on Mycroft was that, so I noticed one of the other questions is, what do you think of other adaptations? And I didn't watch any other adaptations, so I don't have anything to compare to that. But I thought he played a really great brother. I think he's entertaining. He's likable, but he's different. He's also a little villainous. And then when you go to the Abominable Bride, he plays a very large guy who just eats all the
hugely fat.
I think the real Mycroft is supposed to be a bear of a man, so they probably did it as an homage.
Yeah. Because the flashbacks, they show him as pretty pudgy, right, to his childhood.
Oh yeah, he's like President Taft, and yeah. So he was good, and as a I don't know what it's like to be an actor. I can't imagine writing and acting.
Same here. That's my answer too. I just can't imagine it.
Yeah.
So
wow.
I mean, there's a number of people who have had to do that, and it's quite an undertaking. Luckily, he's not the lead, so he doesn't have to be Benedict Cumberbatch or Martin Freeman and executive produce a show and run it at the same time. But I mean, who was the lead in Fleabag? She wrote and executive produced everything and oversaw everything that went into that project. And you have to have a brain that can multitask for sure, because a lot of stuff is going on. And it's hard enough just to direct and act in something at the same time. I know.
Yeah, that's like Clint Eastwood level. I just don't feel like my brain is big enough for that.
Well, I think he's been a fan of Sherlock since forever. He and the co-writer both.
Yeah.
Yeah, I encourage you to see that special, that hour-long special, if you haven't already, because
what's it called again?
Gatiss, I don't remember, but it's in season 3. If you buy season 3, it's like the 4th episode.
Oh wait, you're talking about The Abominable Bride?
Nope, it's a documentary on the making of.
Oh, actually, I did kind of see a lot of that.
Right, and
like
Gatiss reads a lot from the original text.
Yeah. That was good.
And you can tell that it's a labor of love for both he and Moffat, that they ate it up as kids, and it's just in their blood.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's that's such a fortunate thing to be able to act something that you've loved since you were a kid, and now you are part of a timeless pantheon. I mean, that's been going on for over 100 years of a character that's beloved by millions and millions of people forever.
Well, and
And
that's how we feel about writing The Strike, is like just, honored to be able to do justice to these characters on the TV screen. So but I could never, I'll be like what's her name, Diana Garbledon from Outlander, who wrote Outlander. We have requests to do Outlander as a show. But she makes like guest appearances in as like, the stuffy woman or whatever. So I'll do like a cameo and then get, like a homeless person or something like that. I just couldn't imagine, but I mean, more power to the people who are able to do that. I think that they're able to bring a level of depth and understanding to a character that maybe, other people that aren't writing it don't know about. And I think that's one of the reasons why Mycroft works really well for me as a character. He shows so many like beautiful sides to him. And
it's all subtle. It's all so subtle. He's such a cold fish on one hand, but you see a deep love for his brother and a desire to protect him. And they even say it in Buckingham Palace. He says, "I'll be the mother," and he says, "Our childhood in a nutshell." Beautiful encapsulation of their relationship and the way Gaddis's character is always trying to protect him. Look, I think The Strike is to Atlas Shrugged what Sherlock is to the Basil Rathbone versions of Sherlock Holmes. Those were classic. They had their day, but they don't resonate with an audience today. Sherlock has it all, and I think that's the way The Strike is. I think anybody who wants.
We need to start adding that into our comps, Jennifer.
Anybody who wants to bring this to the culture again cannot do it in a retro fashion. They can't. It's Gatiss and Moffat understood that going back to the Victorian era would be a loss. It
was fun to do it for the special, right? After you'd already gotten the context of them and after you were already invested in these characters, now you'll go anywhere with them. If they do it on the moon, you'll still go with them.
And the nature of the material, desires to be pushed into the modern world, just like Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged desires to be pushed into the modern world with modern technology, and it works just as well, if not better. It's better to me, to be honest with you.
So a couple more super chats. One from Ellie for $5. Oh, I think this was the one you were referencing, maybe, Jennifer. How did Sherlock compare to other Sherlock adaptations for you? I have not seen other. Well, actually, I will say I watched a few episodes of Elementary, which was what's her name? Lucy Liu played Watson, I think. And it was the American version of Sherlock. And
the American version of anything as good as the English version of anything?
No, with the exception of the one that we did. Oh God, the night of, with the exception of Night of, because that
might have been better, right?
Yes, no, that was better because I watched the British version. I couldn't even get through the first episode.
Okay. And that was British or Australian? It was British.
No, it was British for sure. Okay. It was British, but it was all white people, and there was like no built-in conflict like they were able to do in Night of, in the New York or the American version. I'm not sure if it was. I think it was New York.
New York.
But so Elementary, I was not riveted by it because I gave it up after like 3 seasons. Or not 3 episodes.
But what about Jude Law and
and RDJ? So I started watching that. I actually rented it. I started watching it and I couldn't get past Robert Downey Jr.'s accent. It might have been really good, but I was like, he's American. He can't do it. He can't pull it off. I love Robert Downey Jr. I think he's brilliant. I love him in everything that he does. But this one, especially after coming off the high of Sherlock, it was like, nah.
Yeah, and Jude Law is a great actor too, but
Yeah.
somehow the combination doesn't work there. Sometimes American cinema focuses on all the wrong stuff, and it makes it schlock, and it doesn't.
It focused on the physicality. It focused on Sherlock as an ass kicker, and I don't see Sherlock as an ass kicker.
Well,
he is. Oh, he is. He has the Cato moment, right? The Inspector Clouseau Cato moment, where the guy blindfolded.
He's an expert fencer, right?
Yeah.
And he's supposed to be a boxer as well. Like
but I don't get that as that's how he's defined. I get that as that's a skill that he's developed, and he uses it when he needs to. His biggest skill is his brain and his reasoning. So, all right. So next question. Ali says for $5, I like how Sherlock purposely forgets Lestrade's name. Gavin George, who was it again? And also,
he doesn't purposely forget his name. I think he doesn't remember his name.
He may not do it because it's not relevant.
It's not relevant. He forgets whatever's relevant.
Whatever's
irrelevant.
Yeah, it's not in there. And then she asked also, can we talk about the violin playing? What do you guys think of the violin playing?
Well, I love string instruments in general. Huge fan of cellos, violins, guitars, love them all. I know that there's a piece at the end which was super critical and beautiful. But I also just loved the music that played in my favorite episode 201 with the love thing going on between him and the woman. The music was also played with violin, so it's throughout. But I think the most profound piece was at the end when he uses it to connect with his sister and show her the only kind of love she's probably ever felt. And that was pretty powerful. And it's been built up through the whole thing.
That was a beautiful moment. Now, I'm not sure if the question, the super chat question was around like the skill level that they were playing at. That didn't, I mean, I can be a music critic. I'm sure that if Yaron was watching it, he'd be like, like judging by how he judged at Ocon, the talent show at Ocon, he'd be like, this is really off. But what I loved was that I loved that end too between Sherlock and his sister, and she's a more skilled player. That much is evident, but they just have this. And you know what it reminded me a lot of was, I don't know if you guys have seen it, but the oh God, what's the thing? The Umbrella Academy. There's like a heavy violin influence in that as well. And there's so much story to be told just with that music and with the way that, people, back and forth, communicate just with music alone.
Yeah, I mean, it's a throwback to the original character who uses the violin as a type of meditation, as a way of thinking. And I think it's also interesting, even if that weren't the case, if it were purely an invention of Benedict Cumberbatch, it's a great way of giving a character dimension. Every character should have some characteristics, some habit, something that they do outside of the action, that they can incorporate into a scene that gives it that sense of that signature, and it gives that character its signature.
And I think it was his way of dealing with his emotions. He channeled it through his music and writing his own, composing his songs, where he couldn't necessarily connect with other people with it yet.
Right.
One of the things that I really liked about now we have a request to do Umbrella Academy. One of the things that I really like about his sister is that she what is her name? Euros. They're all named after like whatever, but she actually talks a lot, and it seemed like a very objectivist theme to me, like emotional context when she's sending them through the scavenger hunt. And she keeps saying, what's the emotional context? Because that seems to be one of the things that Sherlock drops is, and Watson has to continuously remind him of that. And there was that one scene between Watson and Sherlock where Watson is like, don't you feel anything for this? And he said, is this going to help me solve the case? Are my feelings going to help me solve? So if not, then
actually partially yes. I mean, and
yes, that's true.
This is the thing we could talk about with objectivists, because many objectivists I noticed have used objectivism as a rationalization to not be emotional.
Right.
Maybe because they fear their emotions. But no, emotions have a very important place in your life, and even in the information of your life. They're not tools of cognition, as Rand says. You can't. They're signs to your internal mechanism, what you value and how you perceive the world, which could be an error, or could be perfectly in keeping with things, and they need to be paid attention to. And not repressed, not pushed away as if they don't matter, because they do.
And I think that is what the sister's message is to Sherlock. What do you think, Jennifer? Because that comes in season 4. Am I the only one that? Maybe I'm the only one that thinks that.
I've got to admit that when we got into those games inside the rock prison Alcatraz-like place, I just felt like it's like a bunch of philosophers, psychologists games that were put before them, that they just played along with it, and I wasn't really into it. So
I do think that they could have done. I think they could have done that better. I think that they could have, and in fact, it could have been probably broken up into 2 different episodes of the same length, maybe. It was fun. Early on in the chat, Robert Nazier said that season 4 jumped the shark. And I kind of halfway agree with that, but it's funny because I look at things, even though it may not have been the best, I look at it from like, what were they trying to accomplish? I'm always like I just want to give them the benefit of the doubt. What were they trying to accomplish? But how could it have been done differently or better?
You remind me again why the sister is in this massive complex by herself.
Because she killed his best friend.
She killed
and burned down the house, and she was a very early psychopath. Sherlock's best friend drowned him in a well.
But did he deserve it?
This whole life, Sherlock turned the boy that was his best friend that was drowned, turned it into Redbeard, called the dog, a dog. So Sherlock always thought that it was his dog that drowned. And he's been suppressing. It's a very kind of very deep level psychological repression that happened.
Like a Clarice in Silence of the Lambs kind of encounter. Do you think they borrowed much from Demi's?
So what I got from, I don't know, what I got from her, the whole reason of why she was going through this whole exercise, because, at the end of the day, you do have to kind of look at things like, I'm an evil genius just for the sake of being evil. And I'm going to put these people through all kinds of evil things because I'm evil.
Yeah. Like that.
and what I felt like what they were trying to say, that I don't think that they actually hit it. What they were trying to say was that she was lonely as a child. Just the same kind of loneliness that Mycroft feels with other people, that Sherlock feels with normal people. She was it would be like, if Ayn Rand couldn't relate to some other insane genius, and that insane genius felt like isolated from Ayn Rand. That was kind of how they built it. But and what she hated about
Ayn Rand, Isabella Patterson kind of thing. Maybe that would.
I don't know enough about that to speak intelligently to it. So, but what I feel like they wanted to try and communicate was that Sherlock had a friend. Sherlock had a friend when he was a boy, and Sherlock wanted to be a pirate, and he would play, and his friend had red hair, and that's where the term Redbeard came in. He actually had a connection. He had a social connection. And whenever the sister would want to play, Sherlock and the friend would just go run off. And so she was always left alone, and she didn't like that. And so decided to get rid of the friend. And it was such a tragic, PTSD effect on Sherlock that he buried the whole thing. And as a result, I think that is exactly one of the reasons why Sherlock doesn't make connections with other people.
Right. Yeah.
And so she goes through this whole exercise of putting Sherlock through this whole maze of stuff, just to, and she keeps saying emotional context, because she wants him to remember how lonely she was. And then at the end, you realize that she's just like alone at their house waiting for Sherlock to come and hug her, which to me, I was like, how did we get from the Alcatraz to the house? and
there was a lot of heroin things going on at that point.
Maybe.
I don't remember this, so this sounds like it's disintegrating fast. I'll have to check out. I'll just have to check this out now. Well, guys, I think
Ellie wants to ask real quick for $5. Thanks, Ellie. One last one, if you have time. Which moment was your favorite? Thanks, guys. You're great. Thanks, Ellie.
Well, I love the first meeting between Irene and Sherlock. When he goes to her house and she says she's going to take a long time to get ready. She's going to take ages to get ready. And of course she comes in her birthday suit, which I thought was fantastic.
What did she call it? Battle armor? I loved it.
Arrayed for battle. It was beautiful. And what I really loved about it, which is hearkening back to objectivism, to, when Dominique, when they were making a statue of Dominique for, was it Stoddard's Temple or whatever it was called? Was that?
Oh my God, that's it's
in the Fountainhead.
Yeah.
Right. Well, how it's a statue of her naked, but she stands in her nakedness proud. There's nothing about her that has an ounce of self-consciousness or anxiety about who or what she is, and for this woman to come into a room, big room, in broad daylight, naked, but wonderfully unaware of the fact that she is, and aware at the same time, aware that it's a very powerful tool that she's using, but not in any way ashamed of her nakedness, the way the religious folks want us to be ashamed of our nakedness. We shouldn't be. I thought that was great. It was the look of pride and fun in her eyes when she was sitting there naked. It was great.
What about you, Jennifer?
My favorite moment was, I played it over a couple of times, was actually the tail end of that story, when she thinks she's got him. She's like, oh, you poor soul, you thought I actually had feelings for you. And he leans in and he tells her that he felt her pulse, and you think he's coming in to kiss her ear or something, and he tells her, and then he tells her that that's the feeling of being lost or whatever. I can't remember the line was. I just thought it was just so like, bam, he played his card. It was checkmate. It was everything in a single moment. It was good.
Yeah, he called her on her pulse. Her eyes dilated. Her pupils dilated. There was no way she could hide her.
Was playing. It was just phenomenal.
That was good. That was good. I would say that mine is different. But my favorite, for whatever reason, my favorite moments were between Sherlock and Mycroft. And the one that I think of very, very deeply is in The Abominable Bride, when Sherlock has basically overdosed. He goes into his mind palace, but he's basically overdosed on heroin or opium or whatever it is. Whatever concoction of drugs he's given himself, he's OD'd on it. And Mycroft, they're waking him up, and Mycroft says, because up until this point, you don't see, like, you do see it at Buckingham Palace, but you don't actually know why. You don't know why there is this like parental love or feeling that Mycroft has for Sherlock. But in just one question that he asks, he says, Sherlock, do you have a list? Do you have the list? Did you make a list? And I think he says like no, and Dr. Watson is like, what are you talking about? What list? Because Dr. Watson doesn't believe that Sherlock is on drugs. And Mycroft is like, oh, Mind Palace, come on, his Mind Palace is freaking hallucinating on drugs. And you see, and Sherlock sure enough pulls out from his coat pocket a list of all the drugs that he's taken, because this was their pact as boys. And they flash back to Mycroft as a teenager taking care of Sherlock as he's withdrawing from whatever drugs he's on. And they make a pact. You will always give me a list of the drugs that you've taken so that I can take care of you. And to me, Mycroft at that point, I don't know that he could have done anything to make me hate him after that point.
That's pretty cool.
Was there ever any diagnosis of Sherlock as bipolar?
I would not see him as bipolar.
Oh, I would.
Really?
Not eating, manic episodes, drug use to try to compensate for this stuff. It does sound very much like that. I was just curious to know if they ever made that.
I'll have to look that up. I feel like he's above being bipolar. he's in a special category of
geniuses and great artists.
Personality disorder all on his own.
Well, folks, I think we've gone way past our time here, so we should probably head over to Clubhouse soon. But I think the next show we're going to do is.
Did we decide on Fargo?
Fargo. I think we decided Fargo.
Oh yeah, we have a whole list. People want to start. Do you want to go through the whole list that we have?
We've got, so people like the last time they want to see Fargo. We're trying to stomach Squid Game. We don't know if we really want to do that because it's just too hard to watch it again.
Peaky Blinders.
Peaky Blinders.
Succession. Yellowstone.
What was that last one again?
Succession, Yellowstone.
Succession, right. And Yellowstone.
Come up in this episode is Outlander and Umbrella. Okay.
So
Umbrella. Outlander came up a bunch of times.
So for now, we're definitely in the next 2 weeks going to go over Fargo. Hopefully, I have a lot to do in the next 2 weeks. Hopefully, I'll be able to squeeze in at least one season. I've already seen 2 seasons for sure, but hopefully, I'll be able to squeeze in at least a season and remind myself, so that when we do it in 2 weeks, I'll have something to say. I don't know. I guess I always find something to say in the end.
Yeah, Mark, I mean, you only saw 2 episodes or 2 seasons of Sherlock and you had a lot to say about it. So
shut me up anytime you want. Okay, so we got to go over to Clubhouse and still do this live, right? Did Rosie set up a Clubhouse for us?
I think so. I think so. We'll see if he did. Thank you, Robert, for the $2 fun show. Thank you. Happy weekend, all. Awesome.
Thank you. Hopefully I'll see you guys in Clubhouse. And otherwise, this has been the TV Talk brought to you by Ayn Rand Center UK with Mark Pellegrino, Jennifer Bouani Jacqueline Schumann. We'll see you in 2 weeks with our thoughts on Fargo. Until then, see you on Clubhouse and tell us what you think about Sherlock. Peace.
Go Niners also.
Oh, yeah.
49ers playing the playoffs tomorrow. So go Niners.
Yeah.
Oh, we're playing LA.
yeah. LA.
No, we're not playing LA. Sorry, we're playing somebody somebody else. Green Bay. We're playing Green Bay.
Oh, wait, who did the 49ers beat just to get there?
Dallas, bitches.
Yeah, they whooped Dallas, didn't they?
Yeah, they whooped them, except for Garoppolo is not a consistent.
Oh, and you can